These are words from a book called The Life and Teachings of the Masters of the Far East, and these words were spoken by Jesus. I'm going to have some orbs going while I read this. It takes a true motivating thought focused on a central absorbing point or ideal to bring forth or accomplish, and you, as well as all mankind, can become that motivating center. Now we all sat down at the table and Jesus resumed the conversation. Not one thing comes forth unless man first expresses the ideal. At one time, man was fully conscious that he was this motivating center and lived fully conscious of his inheritance and dominion. He lived consciously in a condition that you term heaven. All but a few have let go of this divine gift, and today the great majority are absolutely unconscious of this divine quality, which is mankind's true inheritance. What man has done once, he can accomplish again. This is the principle back of the endless array of life and manifestation that you see all around you, and includes your own life, together with that of every existing thing, as every existing thing has life. Ere long, science will give you ample grounds for saying that things are not material, as science will soon see that all things can be reduced to one primal element containing innumerable particles, universally distributed, responding to vibratory influences, and all in perfect and absolute equilibrium or balance. Hence, it follows on mathematical grounds alone that it took some definite moment, some initial action to draw together the infinite particles of this all-pervading universal natural substance in order to bring them into form as selected sub-objects. This power did not originate wholly within a particle, but is a power greater, yet at one with the particle and you. Through your thought and definite action, cooperating with the vibration, give selectivity to these particles. Thus will physical science be compelled to understand, through necessary deductions, so that scientists will recognize the presence of a power which at this time is not understood, because it is inactive, and which is inactive only because it is not recognized. But when recognized and communed with by man and brought into actual expression, it is fully capable of separating certain specific areas for the specific display of this universal cosmic energy. Then there is built up what you look upon as a material universe, with all its different manifestations, by an orderly process of evolution. If orderly, then each stage must lay the foundation perfectly for the greater development of the stage that is to follow. If you can accomplish progress in perfect order and harmony of thought and action, you are in actual accord with power, and this power brings forth, on an unlimited scale, the faculty of selecting the means to an end. You distribute life and energy under a recognized order of cosmic progression. This, then, is not a material universe as you have thought. This is only your definition of it. It came forth from spirit, and it is spiritual, if you will define it as such. This is orderly. I lost my place. It came forth from spirit, and it is spiritual, if you will define it as such. This is orderly, true, basic. If orderly, it is scientific. If scientific, it is intelligent. It is life united with intelligent life. Life coupled to and guided by intelligence becomes volition, and through volition it becomes vocation. Spirit is the primary, vibrating, originating power, and you may enter into spirit and use its power by the simple acceptance or knowing that it does exist. Then let it come forth, and the whole of spirit is at your command. To you it becomes an ever-potent spring of perpetual and original life right within yourself. This does not take long years of study, nor need you go through training or hardships or deprivation. Know and accept that this vibration does exist. Then let it flow through you. You are one with great creative mind substance. Thus you know that all things do exist. If you will but see the divine principle, great principle, good principle, God principle, is all there is, that it fills all space, is all, then you are that principle. And as you stand forth in your Christ dominion and give out this principle, you, by your very thought, word, and act, give this principle greater activity. Thus one more has found his dominion and is using God power and sending it out. As you give out this power, it flows to you. As you give, more is pressed upon you to give, and you will find you cannot deplete the supply. This does not mean going into a closet and hiding yourself. This is getting quiet right where you are, even in the busy so-called turmoil of life, under the most trying circumstances. Then life is not turmoil. It is quiet, contemplative, and compulsive. The outer activity is as nothing compared with the greater activity that you now realize and are one with. This is getting quiet right where you are, seeing God standing forth from you, closer than breathing, nearer than hands and feet, with your whole thought action centered on God. Who is God? Where is the God that your whole thought action is centered or focused upon? God is not a great being outside of you that you are going to bring within and then present to the world. God is that power which is generated and exhilarated by your own thought action. It is true that this power is within and all about you, but it is inactive until you think of it and know that it does exist. Then you see it flowing forth from you in limitless measure. You present it to the world, and the world is benefited by your presentation. You yourself must present the accomplishment by putting forth the driving force of all good, God your Father, the power to accomplish behind every thought and act. Now you are God fulfilling or filling full the accomplishment. This is God, the true and only God, standing forth from you. You are then God the Father, the husbandman, the amplifier, and the projector, the definite and positive accomplisher. It is then that legions fly to do your bidding. The moment you say wholeheartedly, with reverence and deep meaning, that God is in his holy temple, and know that this temple is your pure body, just as you present it and as you truly stand today, that you, the true Christ, live one with God right within this temple, and that your exalted body is a holy, abiding place, a whole and all-inclusive abode. You are an energizer, an all-including and outpouring vessel for this true and divine principle to flow through. Then you pour out more and more of the God which you are and which you love. You worship, you praise, and with your ever-expanding love, you pour out to all mankind that they may see the Christ, the God-man, standing forth triumphant. Now you say with the keenest joy, whosoever will, let him come and drink deeply of the waters of pure life. Those who do this will never thirst again. This power you are using and sending forth is God. The Son accomplishes readily what the Father accomplishes. This is also being humble and bowing before this great power. This is true humility, stepping forth in humble mien, one with your own driving force and power. By constantly contemplating, praising, blessing, and giving thanks to this power, you increase its flow, and as you do this, it becomes potent and more readily accessible to you. Thus I say, pray without ceasing. Your daily life is true prayer. By first knowing that this power does exist, then using it with absolute confidence, you soon become wholly conscious of it. You soon know that it is all-inclusive in and through you. If you will but let it flow, it will rush to you in every instant. It flows to you as you let it flow from you. Stand forth as God and give it out. This is God, your Father, in you and your Father are one. Not servants, but sons, sons of first primal cause. All that I am is yours, for you are I am. It is not I who do the work, it is I am in the Father, and the Father in me brings forth the great accomplishment. As you know that you work one with the Father, there is no limitation, no boundaries. You know it is your divine right to accomplish all things. Then follow me only as I follow the Christ, the true Son, the only begotten of the Father. And as I bring forth and present God, I do bring forth God from within. Then will it be said, all are God. The greatest sermon ever given is, Behold God. This means seeing God standing forth in all glory, right within and from you and from all others also. When you behold God and nothing else but God, you love and worship God and God alone. You truly behold God. You are the Lord, the lawgiver, the dispenser of the law. When you pray, enter your closet, the secret chamber of your own soul. There pray to your Father within, and your Father who hears does reward you openly. Pray and give thanks that you are able to give forth more of God to the whole world. And then there's a little more. I'm going to skip down in this book. This is the Moon Eye talking, not Jesus now, this is a different one. And he's talking about consciousness. That which was before consciousness began is eternal. That which humanity thinks is changeable and inconstant. That which was before consciousness began is truth. That which humanity thinks is truth to them. When the law of truth comes to consciousness, it will erase all that humanity has ever thought erroneously. As the centuries roll on and push back the material veil by the process of evolution, thoughts come through the mind of humanity that revert back to truth, or as we call it in the original cosmic fact. The original cosmic fact. And those thoughts that fill the memory of the past, faced with the facts of the present, and overshadowed by prophecies of the future, stand out definitely upon the path of the whole evolving race consciousness. Thus the race is called back again and again to the original existing principle. By this return and repetition, humanity is shown that creation is eternal. The same with all mankind, but mankind's creatures are always changing, and they are under a manifestation of law called action and reaction. When human beings have gone far enough in their creation of creatures, the great absolute law of truth takes a hand in bringing them face to face with the original plan. Thus we see that cosmic law never allows life to run too far in a tangent. This law is always polarized in equalization, balance, and harmony. In spite of idols or creeds, it will crowd mankind on to complete union with absolute realities. All things that are not in perfect accord and union with actual existing cosmic fact must erase themselves when the absolute law of truth holds sway in the human consciousness. The thoughts of humanity are always so formed as to release their imperfect creations that are only born of half-truths when truth arrives. Cosmic absolute law must be fully satisfied. Thinking, speaking, or acting the law of reality is bound eventually to lead humanity into law or reality itself. The ancients tell us that every tree that the Heavenly Father has not planted within you will be uprooted. Let them alone, blind leaders of the blind. If the blind always lead the blind, shall they not fall into the same ditch? The cycle is fast closing in which the blind of the whole race have led the blind into a welter of ignorance, superstition, and delusion, created by those who believe as human beings think, rather than that which is true and real. The civilization that has risen on the delusions and superstitions of the closing centuries is submerging itself in the welter. Through the pain and tragedy of their misappropriated creations, a new race consciousness has been conceived and is fast evolving. In fact, the door is opening wide for its new birth. There is no other course than to go on from one plane of consciousness to a higher and more advanced step in the actual cosmic path. The only condition forbidden in the vibration of the great cosmos is that quality of thought which allows the human race to become so solidly fixed in what it believes that if it clings desperately to its old delusions and will not let go, it can in no way come into the greater expanse of universal thought. Those thus absorbed in personal consciousness must go on through natural exhaustion of beliefs and experiences until they fail to go forward. Then, of its own accord, absolute law wields a progressive hand through disease, pain, and loss, until the human is satisfied and turns to find the curse of a false ideal within the ideal itself. If a race or nation refuses to let go of things created by a portion of human thought instead of that which really exists, the law takes a hand in its progress by allowing the accumulated vibrations sent out by such a condition to reflect back upon itself through the light ray. Then, with war, strife, discord, and death on every hand, that race or nation is wiped out in order that it may be placed again in a new uplift of creation. Thus it can begin over again in a new contact with that which was before the beginning of human consciousness. Civilization today is fast approaching a great reconstructive moment. All things that seem so stable and well-founded now will soon be immersed in a state of inversion. Every tree that has not been planted by truth will be uprooted. There is approaching a complete cosmic overthrow of the present social, political, financial, and religious institutions that will make room for the placing of the new era in order that humanity may come in closer touch with that which is and was established before the present human consciousness submerged and set it aside. Truth waits on with attentive, loving, and radiant beneficence until man will see that he can embrace and become the consciousness of that which has always existed. Humanity is taking a forward step from the cradle stories of the former generation, and their creations are no longer of any avail to the arisen individuality and spiritual discernment of the discernment of the consciousness of the generation that is fast approaching. Delusions, traditions, and superstitions are nearing the end. It is also true of the civilization which they established. The old idols are good enough for the infantile consciousness that is nearing an impasse. Their delusion has created their undoing, as they all proved to be only cradle stories, woven by master craft of priesthood and preceptor to lull into false sleep the crying infants of an evolving race. Those who saw further afield did not cry, and thus were not lulled to sleep. Most of them saw that the cradle stories were not true, and many stepped boldly forth to erase the untruth, as they saw directly through to the absolute, that which has always existed, and which has always been seen and known, and always existed, and which has always been seen and known, and contacted directly by a portion of mankind. From this portion there will arise a new and more vitalizing consciousness, fully awake and ready to erase the idols that man has set up for his fellow man to follow, and make room for the new ideas which are as old as creation's dawn. These will demand of those who teach, lead, or inspire the race consciousness that they shall do it from a plane of actual living contact, so high that there can be no mistake or contradiction, and on a plane of interpretation that is so simple that it cannot be misunderstood. The awakening tiger of higher intelligence and spirituality will refuse to sleep again, as it is already ravaged from the fragments of the past and disappointed through the torture of misplaced confidence. It will demand a stronger and more vital thought with instruction based upon truth itself. The multitudes are now listening over the heads of past centuries with their creed-bound traditions to the old message that to the newly born is working its unfoldment into the hearts and lives of mankind. This new old message is the clarion call that is heard above the changing voices of creed-bound priesthood. It is louder than the voice of battle. It is louder and clearer than the muffled contradictions of financial, industrial, political, and religious lies. In spite of the creed-bound thoughts of a portion of humanity, their traditional and idolized ideals of God, of Christ and man, of self, of life and death, all must go, and in the absolute freedom from these preconceived ideas there must pass and thus be erased all that was built upon them. There is looming upon the horizon of this new approach a redemption that has an entirely new meaning. This new multitude, coming out of this clearer vision and more definite perception, is redeemed through deeper revelation, emanating out of all races and all people. That emanation is the one life that is in all and through all. In spite of the delusion-bound multitude, their clinging hands and cringing attitude, a greater and more noble vista of the expanding horizon of God, the Christ of man, the Christ of God, of self, and death itself is looming, and another cycle of spirit is dawning for the whole world. Another age of the crystal race is coming up out of the maelstrom. There's a little more. Well, no, there's quite a lot more. Let me go. Whenever a people or nation think of God as absolute, that people or nation is God, for God is established unto them. As they love, worship, and reverence that idea, they do become God. In the fullness of time, they have reached their heritage, that which was first and is established in spirit. Whenever an individual thinks of God, he is God. God is established unto him. Breathe life into humanity. It means the same, God. In this greater understanding of cosmic revelation, men find God the same as God was before human consciousness began to manifest, the same yesterday, today, and forever. There is slowly arising from the ashes of orthodoxy, the actual temple not made by hands, eternal in heaven, in man. A great new race of thinkers is coming into the fore with Herculean strides. Soon the tides will surge over the earth to sweep away the debris of delusion, which has been strewn over the paths of those who are struggling along under the load of evolution. This work is already accomplished. Hundreds of millions are re-released with their heart, soul, and body and instinct free. They are the throbbing pulse of an unborn race that is again heir to the ages. I see them stepping across the ages, walking hand in hand with God. Great waves of wisdom flood toward them from the eternal shores of the infinite. They dare to step forth and declare themselves a part of eternal God, eternal Christ, God and man, one eternally with eternal life. They dare to step forth and to declare to heaven that much that is written by man is a lie and in terrible blindness wrought. This new pulse consciousness, the crest of the wave, that rests on the new race consciousness. This new race sees man himself the highest expression of this on this planet, and one with God through the medium of his life, and it sees that his whole supply flows through that life itself. This race knows that man can live consciously in a perfect universe, with perfect people and in perfect accord, with perfect situations and conditions, with absolute assurance that there is not an error in the great spiritual plan of the cosmos. Man sees God as cosmic spirit pervading everything. Then, with the subtleties of mind through his thought, he does not hesitate to review the fundamentals that have placed him where he is and made him that which he is. Thus he is again one with his sources. He knows that this source is the ever-silent side of his God mind, linked consciously in thought and amalgamated with infinite mind. This new race understands that through sun and shadow, without the bitterness of the soul's true quest for love and true peace, is the truth of God in man. This race does not hesitate to strip the swaddling clothes of delusion from the whole human race. The gaunt specter which for ages has bound the feet of the weak and doubting ego man through his own ignorance will be completely erased. He finds he has erased his every limitation through his true selfhood, completely arisen. He has raised himself from man to God-man. And thus I end this. I'm going to call this Manifestation 101. And this is the Dove Lady, over and out for now.